Hey everyone, welcome back. In the last video, we covered the importance of identifying problems, understanding context, asking the right questions, and using frameworks to help us approach data-driven problem solving. But now let's move past just identifying the problem and create a plan for how we're going to find those data-driven insights. So let's get into our 5 key takeaways, and I'll throw in an example at the end of how you might use this in your career. First off, number 1, make a research and analysis plan. A research plan is the blueprint for your project. It's going to outline the steps you'll take to answer your questions, clarify what information you need, how you'll gather it, and how long it will take. A well-defined plan is going to keep your research and analysis focused and efficient. To build that solid plan, consider each of these guiding questions. What exactly are you trying to learn? Who will benefit from your findings? Where and with whom will you conduct your research? How will you collect your data? When are you going to get it done? And with what resources? What will you use? If you're just starting out your journey, you may not be able to answer every one of these questions right now, but it's still worth taking the time to fill in as much as you know and continually go back to fill it in. In fact, if you haven't, go ahead, press pause, write out your answers to each one. Don't worry, I'll wait. I'll be here when you press play again. Okay, you're back. Great. I hope you worked through your questions and now you have insights to help you get all the information you need to create a good, at least high-level first version or outline of your plan. So let's get into number 2. You need to decide whether you need quantitative data, qualitative data, or a mix of both. Based on the type of problem you're trying to solve, different types of data will be more useful for answering different types of questions. As the names would suggest, quantitative data helps us understand the quantity of a thing, whereas qualitative data helps us understand the quality. Quantitative data is going to deal with numbers and statistics, while qualitative data is going to focus on words and experiences. You can think of quantitative data as measuring things and qualitative data as understanding experiences. And often you're gonna need both. In those cases, you'll want your plan to include a mixed methods approach. That just means one where you combine both quantitative and qualitative data to get a more complete picture of the issues that you're investigating. All right, on to key learning number 3. You should be doing an available information audit. Regardless of whether you're talking about quantitative or qualitative data, there's only going to be 2 ways to get data about your problem. You're either going to use data that already exists, or you're going to make your own. Existing data, also called secondary data, is just data that already exists. It was created for some other purpose and may be useful to you as a secondary use. It can come from anywhere. It can come from reports, databases, system records, research studies, all sorts of places. But I always recommend that you start your problem-solving planning by doing an audit of what information is already out there in the world for you. It can save you so much time, and it also can spark some really great ideas in your planning phase. And once you know what's available, then you can assess whether you have enough and the right kind of information to study your problem. If the answer is no, well, you're gonna have to create your own data to get your answers. All right, number 4. You do need to create a schedule and budget. I know those are kind of the boring parts. We want to get into data. We want to get into analysis. We want answers to our problem. But the schedule and budget is important. You can think of it like going on an exciting trip. The trip's the fun part, but you need to know how long it's going to take, how much it'll cost, and if you create a good schedule, you can stay on track and get everywhere you want to be on time. And if you create a budget, you can do that without breaking the bank along the way. And here's some tips you can think about when setting your schedule and your budget. Number one, start by outlining your major milestones. Start with when does it need to be done and what does done look like? Then break the project down into phases and set deadlines along the way to reach you there by time. When you're setting those deadlines, definitely make sure to consider all the complexity of the tasks that you might need to do and give yourself more time than you might think you need. The fun part about learning from data is we don't always know what we don't know yet. It's so interesting to find out. But that's also the nightmare. When you're trying to stay on schedule, it's gonna have some bumps along the way. So just keep in mind that things are gonna change, they're gonna get delayed, or maybe they'll need to take more additional resources or paths. Try to anticipate these where you can and give yourself some extra room in your schedule for those things that you can't anticipate. Similarly, when it comes to budget, you're gonna want to have some flexibility in there. Just know most projects go over budget and use more resources than we think they will. So plan accordingly. And when you are setting your budget, unfortunately, you're gonna have to start with some estimates. You're not gonna know the true amount of time, resources, or monetary inputs that are required. So we make a best guess estimate, and that can be easily done with known expenses like materials, software licenses, travel. Are you going to compensate people who are participating in it? All of that you can write down and get fairly good estimates. But then you'll just want to use your best assessments about other types of resources. And don't forget to write them down. Make sure you're writing down the skills that you're going to need to have on the project, people's times, different opportunities for collaborating. Just like a schedule, build everything out and try to plan for a little bit of extra room when things go wrong. All right, our fifth key learning for this video is that you need to be integrating ethics into your approach from the very beginning. How do you get there? How do you start with this ethics and integrity-based mindset? Well, there are a lot of ways, but I'm going to give you just some few questions that you can start with in your planning stages. Just like before, you might want to press pause and write down the answers to these. So ask yourself, how will you protect privacy? Will you provide informed consent so that participants are fully aware of the research and consent to it? Will you have systems that help you ensure it? How will you protect privacy? Will you ensure anonymity or confidentiality? It is at the planning stage where you're going to need to decide on things like this, since this is the stage where you choose how you're going to gather data and even the systems and methods that you'll use to do it. So consider, are you going to ensure anonymity or confidentiality, and how? How will you ensure you do no harm? Will you do a risk assessment to evaluate potential risks and identify ways to mitigate them? Will you identify potential economic, emotional, or safety issues so that you can be sensitive to the well-being of participants or those that will be affected by your work? And how will you demonstrate honesty and integrity in your approach? Will you use transparency so that you are clear and open about your research and analysis? Will you make a pledge to report data and findings wholly and truthfully, even if they contradict what you hope to find? This is important, and it will help you create a data-driven approach that will be both ethical and valuable. So those were our 5 key learnings. Create a research and analysis plan. Decide if you need quantitative, qualitative, or both types of data. Do an available information audit. Set your schedule and budget. Integrate ethics into your approach. And now for our example showing how you can use these learnings in your career. Let's just say you want to use your data skills to support a nonprofit organization that's looking to redesign their website to make it easier for people to donate to their cause. You could create a research plan to understand how visitors currently interact with the site and what might be preventing them from donating. You'd assess what data is currently available. For example, you could probably use website analytics tools that track clicks and visits to the site. And this would give you some pretty good quantitative data about which parts of the site are popular and which ones aren't. But you might decide that you also want to understand how people experience the website. For example, you might want to conduct user testing sessions where people can try out the website and share their thoughts with you about their experience. By combining your data, you're then going to be able to help the nonprofit redesign their website to be more user-friendly and ultimately earn more money for their cause. Yay! But don't forget to keep ethical considerations front and center. It's not going to feel so nice if your efforts end up creating harm in some other way. So you'll want to make sure you do things like obtain informed consent from the user testing participants and that their data is kept confidential. And you'll want to make sure that any website analytics tools you might use are ethical and don't track user behavior beyond what is necessary for the project. So that's just a small example of how you might take each of these to create a plan for an organization. If you were following each of these 5 key learnings, then you'd have some great alignment towards solving a problem that's designed to get the right information aligned to what you're trying to solve with the information, and doing it in a way that stays on time, in budget, and ideally with ethical constraints built in. So that's it for our planning today. I'm going to see you in the next video where we're going to move past planning and get into that whole getting the data thing. See you then.